And I think this next session will be an incredibly poignant and urgent conversation for every Georgian in this room and beyond Georgia, anyone that cares about journalism and defending journalists' rights. It goes to the heart of what ZEG is all about, making sure that the stories that need to be told are told. And we're incredibly honored to have three speakers who will all bring a different perspective to this conversation. Leading human rights barrister, Caoilfhionn Gallagher, Irma Dimitradze, a journalist from Batumelebi, and they'll be in conversation with the CEO of the Committee to Protect Journalists, Jodie Ginsberg. Please welcome them to the stage.
Well, hello. It is a real honor to be chairing this discussion this afternoon. We've just had a panel on gender wars, and it feels somewhat fitting to be following that panel with some really phenomenal women talking about a phenomenal woman. Mzia Amaglobeli is an award-winning editor, journalist, founder of Batumelebi and Net Gazeti. She is very well known to many Georgians. She has been doing the kinds of journalism for which I became a journalist, the kind of groundbreaking investigations, standing up to power for more than 25 years. And I wish, much as I'm excited to be talking to Caoilfhionn and Irma, that she was here on the stage with us today. She's not, because she is in a Georgian jail and pre-trial detention on what are clearly trumped-up charges. And it's really important that we are able to have this conversation today and that she knows that we are here supporting her and advocating for her, and not just for her case, but for all journalists unfairly detained worldwide. The organization I run, the Committee to Protect Journalists, has been documenting arrests of journalists for more than 3 decades. And over the last 3 years, we've seen record numbers of journalists in jail. Last year, more than 360 journalists were in jail worldwide. And unfortunately, the trend is worsening, not getting better. We are going to kick off with a conversation with Irma and Caoilfhionn. We're also joined, I believe, by a special guest. And I don't know whether she's going to be able to join us on the screen now. No, that's the video. So we've also got a Nobel laureate. I think that's quite cool. Hi, Maria, how are you?
Hello, hello. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there, but feeling your energy from here.
We know that you're there in spirit. So you may know Maria has talked about Mzia'S case, but also Mzia, very early on in her trial, held a copy of Maria's book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator, and that very much, that spirit, I think, is going to drive our conversation this morning. So, Irma, I know you first met Mzia when you were just 14, and she's something of a hero for you, and you're now having to fight for her. Tell us a little bit about her as a journalist, but also a little bit about the case that has landed her in pretrial detention.
Thank you, Jodie. Thank you to ZEG and to this brilliant panelists. So, it's so difficult to talk about her while she is in prison and she's not here representing everything that she has done throughout these years. But I will try to make my best. As you said, I met her when I was a teenager, because from Tbilisi, 5 hours drive away, there is a small coastal city, which back then was even not that touristy as it is now. And that's where I'm from, and that's where Mzia started her journalism. Before she would meet me, she started this media as a 26 years old young reporter who just wanted to prove that even in the region where the authoritarian ruler is like playing and treating everything as its private kingdom, you can still do real journalism and set the standards, even in a country which is just coming out of ruins of post-Soviet traumas and the wars and everything. And throughout the year, this 26 years old young girl, reporter, made it that from regional newspaper, she set up and grew it into 2 online media outlets, strong ones. One based in the region, one in the capital, covering the countryside, the national news, covering even international news, getting the awards, and, because always being independent and critical and curious journalists, sometimes and very often bothering some people in the power. We always say that when we go to journalism, we know that we sign up for not really easy life, but there are things that we don't sign up for, the things that go beyond the line. And throughout the years, whatever I have heard from her stories, how she was threatened or her journalists were threatened, how there was this surveillance and following and blackmails and so on. Lots of stories which I would listen excited as a youngster, like watching a movie or something. And it was exciting. But the things that are happening right now are not exciting anymore. These are the things that we didn't sign up for. So these days, we've been all talking about how the situation has been going down in recent times, and I won't go into details, just I want to tell you that since last year, when we first adopted this, when Georgian Dream first adopted the foreign agent law, we knew that it was going to go downhill, and it was going to go badly. But at the end of the day, what we saw in last 7 months, it was not a backsliding, which people like to say. It's like a landslide falling from the top of the mountain and like getting everything down. It started with the physical attacks and everything. And to get to her arrest, she is the CEO, she is the journalist, and she's the someone who doesn't like to go out, and she was in the office that day. That was yet another protest. And, as people have been describing this day, this protest was also very violently cracked down, and the arbitrary arrests were going on, and she just saw that her friend was arrested for putting the poster on the ground, and she went to the police station where the protest was already continuing, demanding the release of illegally detained people, and also bringing lawyer to help her friend. And that's when and how it started, with the basic, use of right to freedom of expression and protest. And I just want to play this video because many people who have heard about her may know this very infamous slap episode, but they don't know how it started. It started with her witnessing 9 people being detained forcefully, unlawfully, for just expressing their protest, for putting the poster, and she just put the poster on the fence. And as she told to the court, this was not even an action of, spreading the message on the poster, but it was the protest against injustice, and it was the solidarity towards those who were detained unjustly. And I may want to play this video. It's very short.
Mzia Amaglobeli აკავებენ, Mzia Amaglobeli Batumelebi's manager აკავებენ, Mzia Amaglobeli დააკავეს. Mzia Amaglobeli დააკავეს ამ
Look at this one.
Mzia Amaglobeli დააკავეს ახლახანს. Batumelebi's
So that's the original.
Yeah.
She was arrested for putting up that
Yes.
sticker, right? And
Putting
then she was released.
Then she was taken to the police station, and this doesn't, lawyer would know better, this doesn't give a ground for making an arrest. So they forged the evidences and case, and they claimed that she actually was arrested not for putting up the poster, which is already clear that it was for putting up the poster, but for resisting and disobeying and insulting police. And then they argued with it, and they brought the evidence of proving it. And please, if you could play that second video. There is Mzia in between. Just follow closely. And she's pushed down to the ground. Yeah, please. That's it, I think. So they argued with this widow that she was. She offended she committed the administrative offense of resisting and so on. Even in this video, it's very clear that she's a victim here, not someone who is offending. But most interestingly, she was, due to the papers and the case materials, the first arrest was recorded at 10:58 p.m. And this video was recorded actually after she was released from administrative detention. This doesn't even fit the time frame where she was. So I just wanted to tell you this story, how it started, to give you understanding how forgedly is all these cases against her. Even the evidence is manipulated. And based on this case, they sent her in pretrial detention. And to go to criminal case, I know you want to know. So she was released. And this is what happened. She was before this second footage, she was standing with her family, close friends, who were interested in what happened, why was she arrested, how did she feel, because it's very well known that in that police station, police is, physically assaulting detained protesters. So people wanted to know how she was. And that was when, the protest was all about to, disperse itself. And group of policemen, just out of nowhere, came to where she was standing and started making an arrest of two of Mzia'S close family, friends, relatives. And then this happened, the clashes. This is when it happened. When it was over, Mzia was trying to find out what happened, and the police. And in this, you cannot see all the assault and all the insult that she is getting, right?
But the key thing is, right, that she subsequently slapped the chief of police,
yeah.
right? She
and
slapped
at the
chief
end,
of police.
that happens, yeah.
She slapped the chief of police, and that's when it gets really problematic, because, she did do that. She absolutely did do that. And so, as we have seen in many cases, certainly that we've dealt with in the past, that really muddies then the waters. But nothing subsequently, neither the pretrial detention nor the potential 4 to 7 years that she faces in jail, appears to be justified by any of that. And Caoilfhionn, you've worked on dozens of these type of cases. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of legally should be the case for this kind of action, and how often we see criminal charges brought against journalists for something that's nothing related to their journalism in order to silence them?
Absolutely, and it's really important to say that the work that Mzia has been doing for such a long period of time has been really groundbreaking. I know people in the room know that, and the authorities were waiting, essentially, for an excuse. And what you saw first was that sticker, the sticker on the wall, the removable one, came off in about 10 seconds. Not a criminal offence to have put that on the wall. The sticker said, "Georgia goes on strike." That's what it said. And she was doing it when reporting on others peacefully putting up posters and then being forcibly arrested and indeed assaulted. Now, the context is that multiple journalists at this time were being physically assaulted. At the time that this series of incidents that you've just been taken through by Irma happened. But it seems to me what's happened with Mzia goes further than the attacks on individual journalists, because she is an emblematic person. She's the CEO, as you've heard, of these two very important media organizations, founded when she was in her mid-20s, with a colleague who was also female. We've obviously got Maria Ressa joining us, who with two other women founded Rappler a number of years ago. You know, sometimes we hear that phrase, if you want something done, ask a busy woman. I think here we've got some very good examples of that. But, you know, you've got a situation where by going after Mzia, it was designed to send a very, very clear message to the media ecosystem across Georgia. So it's not just going after an individual reporter. Going after the CEO in this way sends a very chilling message. Now, that's something that we also saw in Maria's case. I lead the international team for Maria Ressa, working with my colleague Amal. And in Maria's case, we've seen going after Maria as the head of Rappler sends a message to any journalist in the Philippines. If we can go after someone as big as Maria in this way, it obviously sends a chilling message to anyone who might dare to practice journalism in the Philippines. And Mzia's case is designed to do the same thing.
I want to come back to sort of the law around this and the disproportionate nature, because that's certainly something, again, that we're seeing again and again, is these disproportionate pre-trial detentions, very long sentences. But Maria, I want to bring you in because I know that you've said before, you know, the whole kind of way in which the Duterte regime sort of criminalized you before any criminal charges were brought. And so maybe talk to us about the way that that sort of process works to criminalize a journalist before they've actually been charged with anything.
So, you know, first of all, thank you, Georgia, for your strength, your courage. This is the 200th day of straight protests, right? That's like the daily through the worst of the cold. And that is a great example to the rest of us around the world that you're not going to voluntarily give up your rights. For the journalists who are on the front line, like Mzia, who were talking about, the costs are high, but there are costs for everyone who stands up for what they want. So in terms of what happened to us, I think the same thing has happened to you, which is, you know, social media was first used to seed a meta-narrative, journalist equals criminal. You can see this happening all around the world, right? Journalists are not criminals, but if people hear it all the time, you say a lie 1,000,000 times, it becomes a fact. And so that was 2016, 2017. I had 21 investigations. This is before I had Keelan and Amal and a team coming in. And we didn't even have a lawyer really on staff, right? So 21 cases. Then after that, 2018, the first shutdown order for Rappler. It's hard to criminalize me immediately because this is my 39th year as a journalist. I was CNN Southeast Asia correspondent, so people knew who I was, similar to what you're talking about in Georgia now, right? So 2018, in 14 months, I received 11 criminal charges. And that was, thank you, you know, Keelan, Amal came in and took a look at what we had, but that's when I realized I could go to jail for over a century. But here's the last part. I'm not in jail, right? I'm still here. After the Nobel, I was able to travel. I did lose my rights to travel for a period of time, some of them very personal cost to me. I guess I just want to say that while we're on the front lines, we remain on the front lines, and everything you do, not just Zia, every journalist, every Georgian who stands up now, not just protecting Georgian democracy, you are protecting democracy all around.
Thank you, Maria. I want to come back in a second to how Zia is doing. You know, we've seen a lot of kind of great images of her being sort of fairly defiant in court, but I want to come to you, Keelan, and ask about what's important at this moment in a trial like this. It feels like a very important time in the proceedings. So talk us through what's important at this kind of moment.
Yeah, so Zia's facing 3 separate cases. So she's facing an administrative case under Article 173 for insulting and resisting a police officer, a criminal case, which is the most serious one, under Article 353 for attacking an officer. That's the trumped up charge in relation to the slap. And the slap was following that assault on her, which we've all seen, where she was a victim. And in this frustration, there's this small physical contact, which they've now trumped up into a charge which could lead to a sentence of 4 to 7 years behind bars. And then there's a new administrative case, this is the third one, which is utterly ridiculous, under Article 150, which is for distorting a building's appearance. And that's something they came up with later when they were criticised for the first unlawful arrest about the sticker. So distorting a building's appearance is the sticker which went up, was there for about 10 seconds, and then came off the wall. I mean, just ludicrous. It's like a kind of criminal damage type charge. Now, when we look at the detail, can see how ridiculous that is. The problem is that you are not dealing here with a rule of law compliant system. There's a whole series of absolutely farcical things which have happened in this case so far. The investigation, the criminal investigation, was headed by the officer who was the alleged victim. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up, really. And the key thing at the moment is that it is clear that in Georgia, you are not going to get a fair trial. She hasn't had due process yet. And really, what's going to make the difference here is ensuring that the world is watching and that there's a proper international strategy. Now, that's really key. Now, what the attempt has been made here with the Foreign Agents Law to shut out the world's eyes. This is a classic tactic. The same thing happened in the Philippines too. So what you do is you have years and years of a smear campaign undermining journalists and undermining journalism. You try to cut off their life source within the country. You try to criminalize funding coming from outside the country. And you try to ensure that those who stand up for individuals, even the lawyers themselves within the country, if they get any international support, they themselves may also be targeted under the Foreign Agents Law. And that's like a perfect storm, which means that the person who's at the heart of it, the person who's in prison, is at the mercy of this unfair system and is not getting the international support that they need. So now more than ever, we need to ensure that there's proper focus internationally on the case. And one of the difficulties that we've got here is that many of the countries which have the most leverage with Georgia are not friends of journalists. You know, you're dealing with China, Russia, for example. But I think really key here is going to be what the Council of Europe does, what the European Union does, and what Germany does, because Germany is one of the main trade partners. And I think they're really key. And we have coming up in the next number of weeks some really key moments. Next week in Geneva, the United Nations Human Rights Council is sitting. The Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression is giving her annual report. I hope that we see multiple countries in their private bilaterals with the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression and publicly speaking out and shining a light on what's happening in Georgia through wonderful work from Mani, Irma and her team, and indeed from CPJ, which I'm very proud to be on the board of. I know that there's going to be an urgency resolution in the European Parliament this week. That's very, very important. And we've got to ensure that Georgia is not forgotten and that we're showing the regime, and I am going to use the word regime, we're showing the regime and the authorities that there will be consequences if they continue to criminalize Mzia in this way.
Irma, what has the response been like inside Georgia to Mzia'S case? Journalists are not necessarily always the best at supporting one another, I have to say. But it feels like there is a real movement here for us. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that's looked like?
Yeah, sure. And I think to start telling about it, I should also mention one reason why she is so much targeted. It's that we have very vibrant media landscape and quite diverse, with the critical media, independent media, and so on, different voices. And here, when comes it to independent media, the smear campaigns, you know, the accusations that they represent opposition or some business groups, like these things don't work on them because independent media has very close ties with the community. The people know your journalist, people do know you. So in a country of this size, it's very difficult to, attack the reputation of independent media. That is why she is targeted. That is why she is being exemplary, like they are trying to make example out of her punishment. It's not only her being on a trial, it's independent media being on a trial in Georgia. And this is something that I don't need to explain to Georgian journalists because they all know it. They all understand it. And we Georgian journalists who we differ a lot, we have different voices and so on, everyone is united around this case because even without you trying to communicate this message to them, they know it. People are together you can go like in a tiny details also, for example, like sharing the materials for free, like offering their footage for free or live stream, or planning together to have the talk show all together. And there was the documentary film about Mzia'S case, which was streamed in most of Georgia's independent and critical media all at the same time. And this is something I see and I want to see on a global level. Because when I was listening to Maria also right now, and she was talking about her case, it's so similar. And we were yesterday talking about this, how similar we are to each other and how similar are our struggles, right? And I think it would be much easier if we, the global journalists, global media community, the journalists everywhere would understand it. Because I think it was a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when a Hungarian journalist contacted me and asked me for an interview. She asked me to talk about the impact of Russian law and how the foreign agents law work, because she said they are also expecting that same kind of law would be enforced, and they were working interviewing those people who already live in the countries where this was brought. And it was so painful because just a year ago I was interviewing Russian and Belarusian journalists, trying to use their experience as a wake-up call. And now I was being interviewed by Hungarian journalists to talk about what was the cost. And then I was thinking, would you be the one who will be interviewed by Slovakian journalists next time? So this is something that's happening in Georgia, that we have understanding that this is how it is moving. You mentioned at the beginning the number of unlawfully detained journalists, and it's growing. But we have here the one only right now, and we have hope that we can fight back in Georgia. And this is what Georgian journalists understand, and this is what is my message to all everyone, like Maria does it also, because we know that we were next.
And international solidarity does work, right, Maria? Can you talk about I can see myself, that's weird. Oh no, there you are. Can you talk about the Hold the Line coalition and kind of what it meant? You obviously had a stellar legal team, but you also had a whole bunch of organizations and people kind of coming in behind you. What difference does that make?
Everything. It is everything. The Hold the Line coalition was actually the Committee to Protect Journalists. So Keelan sits on the board as well as I do. I'm not a great board member, but we're all around you. We know journalism around the world is under attack, and it is coming for you if it hasn't already. Right, so the Hold the Line coalition is more than 60 different organizations that have been pulled together, and their goal, frankly, is to help protect journalists. It's not enough, because now we need to expand that Hold the Line coalition to civil society. What does civic engagement look like in this age of exponential lies? Journalists are the front lines, but right after that, you have CPJ, will come under, sorry, not to be the doomsayer, right? But every single person trying to protect their rights in an age of rising authoritarianism. I mean, you look at VDEM, which in March just released a report that said 72% of the world is now under authoritarian rule. The time to protect our rights, the time to hold fast, to hold the line is now, because they're now nearly 3/4 of the world is under authoritarian rule, and they don't stay in their own countries. As you just said, Irma, they help each other. So collaborate, collaborate, collaborate before it's too late.
Thank you. And in the spirit of recognizing awesome women, there's also Julie Passetti with us, who was key in the Hold the Line coalition and driving all of that in Maria's case. So it's fantastic to have so many of the people that I think can help really give better voice to Mzia'S case.
Yeah, and also I think, like we started and we mentioned many times, that there is this trend of going after media, that like growing authoritarianism and so on. And when this is a trend like going on and always the end is the same, always the trend like ends up in full authoritarianism, your brain also gives you a signal when you see the beginning stage of this process. You think, okay, that's lost. Like, I believe there are people abroad and like around the world who look at Georgia and think, oh, we've seen it, it's gonna go down. And I want to make it very clear that it's all up to us. The trends are created by us. We can reverse this trend, and we can make an example where it will be reversed, and also it will give us a hope, like Maria being still outside of jail, right? She said, yeah, there are so many cases against me, but I'm free, and I'm not sitting inside a prison cell, I'm still doing my job. This was an example, the great example. Now we can set another example where it would be like the whole country itself, because we know that, and she said, time is now, time is yesterday, time is not now, it was yesterday. And all these things that are happening right now, the laws, the attacks, these are created for making this anticipation environment where you still think that something is coming, or how this law will be implemented, or no, there is nothing coming, everything has come already, nothing better is gonna come. And this is for you to blind you, to fool you. It's a trap, and you should not let yourself to be in this trap. We should act now if we didn't act yesterday. This is, yeah, thank you.
Caoilfhionn.
Gosh, follow that. I just wanted to make 3 quick points. The first thing to say is, you heard Maria talk about the power of international solidarity. It's really important to say it's not just powerful at a kind of human level, that it gives you resolve and support psychologically. It actually really impacts on the legal strategy, because these are politicized cases. These are not cases which are playing by the legal rules. And the bottom line is that knowing that the world is watching and knowing that that support is out there undoubtedly has an impact on the decision maker. And we saw that in Maria's case. The fact that Maria's case was being shouted from the rooftops in such a brilliant way by the Hold the Line coalition undoubtedly helped when it came to us trying to get her permission to travel for the Nobel, for example, because we were able to say, if you don't allow her to travel to collect the Nobel Prize, we will empty chair her. There'll be an empty chair on the stage, and you, President Duterte, are going to have to explain why you stopped this brave, brilliant woman coming to collect the Nobel Peace Prize. And we were able to show the scale of support there was, the scale of coverage that there was internationally. So that made very clear to the Duterte regime what was at stake in the event that they prevented Maria traveling, in the event that she was put back in prison, her bail was revoked. So that was critically important.
And also what's at stake for them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's critical. So it's important to say that. Second thing is, many of you may know that Maria was described at one stage by someone from the authorities as a prostitute. That's the language that was used about journalists. And when you look at Georgia's foreign agent law, it's very similar. The kind of language is, this was spring 2024, the language is, referring to pursuing the interests of a foreign power. So it's designed to undermine the very nature of journalists and journalism. It's designed to suggest you're kind of a gun for hire and you're just selling your wares and peddling a line which you don't really believe. That's where the prostitute phrase comes from. That's where the law comes from. And it's important to say that's designed to undermine journalism, and we've got to push back at that narrative. And last thing I wanted to say, just very quickly, is I know that to Mzia, journalism is not only a profession, it's also a tool for social change. And one of the things that I've admired greatly about Mzia's work is the work that she's done on historic memory and her efforts to document Soviet-era repression and to seize back the narrative. Similarly, Maria's entity, Rappler, was designed from the outset to be anti-corruption. And this is what they really fear. When you have journalism with a purpose and journalism with an editorial line which is anti-corruption and which is designed to undermine the false narrative and the gaslighting on a grand scale which was happening in the Philippines and which has been happening in Georgia, that's what they really fear. And it's why it's vital that we seize back the narrative ourselves.
Absolutely. Irma, did you want to say something?
Yeah,
then I'll go out.
just quickly, like, and the outlets that are blocked in Russia and enlisted as anti-Soviet propaganda spreaders or something like that. Yeah, this is something very weird that Russia blocks the outlet in Georgia, and then Georgian authorities in jail her and don't skip a week without appearing on TV and calling her a foreign agent, and even saying the most ridiculous part in her case is that they actually wrote it down in the report that Mzia received the instruction to attack police officer, to slap police officer via phone. And based on this report, the court issued the order to actually access her phone, all the data in her personal phone and so on. Like, they are really making this like foreign agent acting on some instructions and so on.
You know, sometimes I listen to these things and I think, you know, it could be a Armando Iannucci satire who's been here the last couple of days, except that it's real and it's not funny. I really want to make sure that we've got time for you, the audience. It's really great that we have so many people here on a Sunday at lunchtime. So we're going to go out to the audience for questions. I think there's a microphone. There's a lady here. Someone's coming to you.
Hi. I want to ask, we've seen a lot of journalists, Georgian independent journalists, being fined. As of like last month, we've seen a lot of them being fined. We've seen a lot of them being attacked physically on live interviews. We've seen people attacking them in the night, waiting by the place they live. We've also seen a lot of attack on online platforms, a lot of misinformation that is working against the journalists. I wanted to ask, and none of the people who did the physical attacks are brought to justice. We still don't know their names. They've just seemingly disappeared into the night. I wanted to ask, how do you think we can get justice in this unjust justice, the way protesters say, how can we get justice, even with the outside of the country putting pressure on the government to free Mzia, who is genuinely a symbol of the journalistic oppression in Georgia? How can we take steps to actually getting the justice for the independent media that we deserve?
That's a great question, and I think it's really worth restating this point, right? That, I mean, it will be familiar to Georgian journalists, but for those of you who are less familiar, there have been some really, really violent attacks on journalists, including people being hospitalized. No one, not a single person, has been held accountable for any of those attacks on journalists, and yet we have a journalist in jail for tapping a police officer. Irma, do you want to speak to the impunity question, and then I can talk a little bit about it?
Well, I think we don't have a choice other than fighting, and we have a country to get back, because all institutions are captured in this country. But not all minds are captured in this country. This is what differs Georgia from others. Because the things happened so quickly, propaganda didn't have much time, enough time, to capture all minds of the citizens and the public. Propaganda still needs long period of time to achieve it. So we still have a chance because we have the fighters, because all those journalists from the hospitals, after being fined or after being placed in administrative detention, went back to the field and continued working. And we have the chance to win this. And I think the things that Caoilfhionn named that we can use, like international support, like CPJ, this panel happening, after this panel having it follow up, like having the proper support and spotlight that we need, as urgent and as quick and rapid as the attack was. If it is less, it won't work. Then we have a chance to get justice, and we have a chance, the foreign journalists have a chance to have something to hold on, and don't call this panel desperate or depressive, because this panel, I think, and this question and these answers are something giving hope, and we still have this hope, and then if we use it, then we will win it.
But it's a tough question, right? How do you get justice in a captured system?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of quick things. The first thing to say is that the Council of Europe context is vital. Now, many of you will have heard yesterday Paul Caruana Galizia, I don't know if he's in the room at the moment, but the brilliant Paul Caruana Galizia, who I'm also privileged to have as a client, speaking. And when Paul's mother was assassinated in October 2017, it came against a backdrop of total impunity in Malta, in circumstances where she'd been attacked online, she faced 48 cases at the time, and the message which went out very clearly was a green light to attack a journalist. The message was given that she was fair game, essentially. And what we're seeing here is a combination, really, of four things all happening at once. The physical attacks, including some individuals who've required surgery, I know, so very serious physical attacks with zero accountability for the people who did that, even though there's a very clear evidence base in much of it, and some of it was live streamed. You've got that first. You've got second, the oppressive overall legal landscape, including the foreign agents law. You've got thirdly, these emblematic individual cases, particularly Mzia'S case, which in itself is very problematic, but is designed to have a chilling effect on others. And then you've got the online attacks. So both the disinformation, but also there's much very misogynistic material about female journalists, for example, online, and a lot of material I've seen online which is very targeted at other minority journalists, so LGBTQ journalists and so on. So you have that combination, all of which is designed to kind of shrink the space. Now, in terms of accountability, there are mechanisms we can use, which we've seen work in other cases, but which take a long time. So the European Court of Human Rights, for example, some very powerful case law in relation to Turkey and Russia. I'm afraid it takes 6 or 7 years, though, to get those kind of judgments. That's simply not good enough. So we need to think about faster mechanisms which we can use. My view is something that we used very effectively in the Malta case was the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, where you can get quick-fire results fast. My view is that there's good work to be done in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and we need to start using that. And my view also is that we need to start using the UN mechanisms. There's lots of weaknesses in the UN mechanisms, but one of the advantages of them is that you don't need, with the special procedures of the Human Rights Council, to do what's called exhaust domestic remedies. You don't need to wait till the very tail end of the processes in the Georgian courtroom before you then go to the special procedures of the Human Rights Council. So it seems to me, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and UN Human Rights Council special procedures, there is much that can be done there and can be done quickly. The Georgian authorities are coordinated in their crackdown on journalists and journalism. We have got to get coordinated too.
Irma said, in one of our conversations prior to this panel, Irma said this beautiful phrase that I really love. She said, in the war, you go in with armor, not with roses. And I definitely feel that from these discussions. Question at the back there.
Hi, Deborah Wild, journalist based in Georgia. As you pointed out, authoritarian regimes, when gaining more ground around the world. And as you pointed out, we need to get coordinated. Maybe you could tell us, do you have a feeling that awareness of we have to fight back and we have to get coordinated is spreading in the democracies that are left, that this is a much larger fight, and unless we team up and we get coordinated to fight autocracies, it will come to us, and it might be too late by the time we wake up. The other side is playing chess, and we still play checkers.
It's a great question. I'm going to ask, I think Maria would be a good person to ask this question. Maria.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. So first of all, really, when you're in the trenches, you have no idea what is going to work, and you just keep moving step by step, right? And, you know, roses and armor. I would say roses and armor, because we are empathetic. We cannot lose that part of who we are, right? We believe in certain values. Just because we have been oppressed or victimized doesn't mean we do it. So the first on the problem of impunity is it is global. We're seeing it, and I love Keelan's energy, but you know, it's still dark when you're the one attacked, and you just have to keep going. That's the first. Second, lawyers are under attack. In the Philippines, more lawyers were actually killed during the time of Duterte than journalists. So no, you're pulling the collective together right across the board in all of civil society. And what's at stake? Every day we do not protect our rights, we lose more and more, right? That's the second. And finally, the last one. This is the best part. I would never have thought that Duterte, the president who tried to jail me for almost a century, would himself be in jail now, waiting for trial, being charged by the ICC for crimes against humanity. You have no idea what will happen from this point. Walk out and walk together, and you do the right thing.
Are there more questions? I think there's one down the front here.
Thanks very much. Super inspiring. My name is Lisa Henry, and we work with the International Rehabilitation Council of Torture Victims. So going into detention center to see if people are being tortured, how we can document it, fight against it. I recall from not so many years ago, one of our colleagues, a photographer from Belarus, who was active during the protest, arrested, and thrown into detention. One of the most important things he told us was the people who had been outside the prisons calling the names of the people who had been arrested. They could hear through the windows of the prison that people were aware that they were in those prisons. They were not forgotten. And he said this was a very important, small human link to the people on the outside. They assumed all this was going on with the international collaboration, of course. We're going to be doing something at the Human Rights Council next week. We're going to be bringing this case forward. But the international, I think, has to be linked with the local. So I don't know what's going on here. And as far as are people around the prison, are they shouting? Are they protesting? Is it even possible? Yep. One. And the other is there any kind of psychosocial care for Zia's family and all those around her who must be incredibly traumatized, powerful people, but still needing some help. So organizations like some of the ones that we support here in Georgia can be doing that. So I hope for the mental health care of you phenomenal frontline folks, there is help. We'd love to collaborate and do more.
That's such a great point. And we know from the work that we do at CPJ, one of the things that we hear time and time again is how important it was for people to know that there was someone on the outside championing them, to get a letter, to hear about the news coverage, even if it comes weeks after the event, to know that it's happening. I know that it will be conveyed back to Zia that this is happening. And that has a real psychological boost, and you should never underestimate the importance of just simply doing it and it may feel hopeless, but doing it because it has a really positive impact on the person inside. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, about Mzia, yeah. Actually, there are so many things going on that we sometimes forget that after she was detained under the criminal charges, she was actually subjected to something that toll amounts to inhuman treatment. The man, so-called victim in the case, tried several times to storm in her room, where she was placed with her hands cupped behind her back, attempting to physically get even with her, let's say so. And he was only stopped by female officers. It was on one of the attempts when he couldn't physically reach her, he spat into her face and ordered the officers not to let her drink water or have access to toilet, saying something, let her wet her pants. So it was a huge trauma for her, not only this, like with all the injustice, and the second day our cameraman being arrested only because he was our cameraman. And it led her to go on a hunger strike for 38 days, which had a huge and terrible effect on her health. And during this time, everyone was doing the things like that, like sending her letters, trying to gather near the detention center or so on. One thing I want to mention, the lawyer who is a friend of ours also told me that when she told Mzia that Maria Ressa had retweeted the post, she smiled. And for her, it's so important, not because as a person is not alone, because she realizes that this support, this panel, and other things are also spotlight to the media. And the one thing she always calls and says is talk about media. And she always apologizes. She starts the call and ends the call. Oh my gosh, what a bad time to leave you alone. And this is the only thing that bothers her. She turned 15, on May 12th, and the colleagues and people went around her prison where they sang and lit the candles and so on. And she called and she said that the window is so high, I tried to reach, but I couldn't, but I could hear you. I don't know about the mental health, we are in the process, in the front line, so sometimes we do forget that there is something called mental health or that we need to care about it. But we became the therapist of each other. These talks became the therapy, and the people supporting us is a therapy. She's weak, she's still losing the weight. And when she came last time to the courtroom, she was like a walking skeleton, and I was so terrified. But because she wants to express that she's not giving up, she stands there for 5 hours. There's a bench, but she doesn't take a seat even for a moment. And she's brought by car, 6 hours of a ride, then 5 hours standing in the courtroom, and then brought back 6 hours. So when she expressed such a strength and readiness and a will to fight to the end, then you don't have any other choice but, to fight before it's too late.
So Keelan, and then we're going to have to wrap it up, unfortunately.
So I just wanted to say, here we've had Maria showing up, the incredible Maria Ressa showing up to speak out for Zia. I mentioned Paul Caruana Galizia earlier. He and his family are great supporters of so many journalists at risk who I work with. Just a few days ago, I was over in Canada before the G7 speaking about my client Jimmy Lai, a political prisoner in prison for conspiracy to commit journalism, essentially in Hong Kong, being supported by my friend Jason Rezaian, who 10 years ago was in prison in Iran for the crime of being a journalist. And I've got to say, I find it so inspiring that you have people who are in the club no one wants to be in, who've had the worst possible thing happen to them, and who've walked through fire, who've been in prison themselves, who fought for their loved ones who are in prison, who've had family members killed for being journalists. And they, instead of going back to their lives, decide that they're going to advocate for others. It is so incredibly, incredibly inspiring. And I draw so much hope from that. But the other thing I draw hope from, because I appreciate it's been rather depressing, this panel. This time last year, Vladimir Kara-Murza, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, was serving a 25-year sentence in a Siberian prison cell. Alsu, Kermasheva, Evan Gershkovich were in prison in Russia, and it seemed hopeless. And with political will and creativity, people shouting about their cases from the rooftops, and countries coming together, in August we saw those remarkable releases in Russia at a time when Russia is at war. And it seems to me, if you can do it in a case like Vladimir Kara-Murza's, we can certainly do it here for Mzia.
So, Irma mentioned that Mzia travels 6 hours and she stands in a courtroom for 5 hours. So I think it's fitting, I'm not going to make you stand for 5 hours, but I think it's fitting that we end this session by standing and giving Mzia a round of applause and thanking our fantastic panelists.